A very warm welcome to the eighth episode of the podcast of the World Wind Energy Association, The World of Wind Power. My name is Stefan Gsänger, and it's my pleasure today that we can speak with our guest today about the largest wind power market of the world, about China. So it's my great pleasure to welcome today Mr. Guiyong from the Chinese Wind Energy Association, who is in charge of the international activities of the Chinese Wind Energy Association. Welcome to you.
Hi, Stephen. It's a great pleasure to talk to you through a podcast, and thank you very much for having me today.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure, and I think people will be very curious to hear about from you first-hand information how the Chinese wind energy market is developing. But before we start with that, could you introduce yourself? What is your role, and how have you come to the Chinese Wind Energy Association? And maybe also explain what the Chinese Wind Energy Association is doing in China.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. I joined in Chinese Wind Energy Association in 2008 and started to work with wind power since then. So I'm doing market analysis and policy research and organizing international affairs. So it's very gratefully I could involve in this in many prominent policy frameworks design and formulation in China. So during the past 15 years, I have witnessed the development of wind power in China and in the world. I should say it's a fantastic experience because you can find it's not just a job, but a promising career. So it's something that can really make some change to the world, to the people. So it's quite a story. And Chinese Wind and Association established in 1981, and is a non-governmental organization and a society of wind power entities, including enterprises, research institutes, colleges, and financial institutions. And CWA works with the members and partners both inside and outside China by organizing events, to make policy advisories, to do roadmap consultings, and to do the publicity promotion activities. Yeah.
So you have joined, you said in 2008. That was so you've been part of the most exciting developments when the Chinese wind industry saw very, very dynamic development, exponential growth. But I personally, I'm now also impressed because I didn't know that the Chinese Wind Energy Association goes back to 1981. So that's older than, I believe, most of the wind energy associations around the world. Who was behind the founding of the Chinese Wind Energy Association in 1981? Must be a small group of scientists.
Yeah, it started from a small group of scientists and also got the emphasis from the government and some very high officials. So because at that time, we could trace the history back to the 1980s for China to study and apply wind power technology from very smaller wind turbines. Because um, uh, they have to use the wind turbines to provide the electricity for the remote places where beyond the coverage of a power grid. So most of them and most of the smaller wind turbines are off-grid turbines at that time. So, but the rapid growth started from 2006. As you know, when the renewable energy law in China issued. So during the following 5 years, the related policies have been issued one by one, and making a complete policy frameworks for renewables, not only for wind power but also for solar PV and other renewables. So among this, feed-in tariff policy played a very crucial role. So during this period, China has developed a relatively complete supply chain and industry chain, both for onshore wind and offshore wind power. And from 2020, China wind power came into a new era. the benchmark is grid parity. So we don't have subsidies from that time. And as the carbon peak and neutrality targets have been announced by the central government, wind power in China has received unparalleled emphasis, and record-breaking installations have seen. So during the following 3 years. As you know, now there are about 80 gigawatt in new installations last year, and about 500 gigawatts in total to the present. So wind power penetration in the system is about 10%. And wind electricity is now the second big power source in the grid. I think it's a big success. It's just a little bit less than coal-fired power, and it's a little bit more than hydropower. And another renewable power is solar PV. It's about 5% electricity in the whole systems. So wind and solar will be the main source in power system if we want to get the carbon neutrality by the mid of this century.
That's a very impressive, and we've already explained now a lot, very impressive history. I personally visited for the first time China in 2004, so it was just before it all started. It was when we had our World Wind Energy Conference in Beijing 2004, which I think was very useful to connect the international players with the Chinese ones, because the Chinese market at that time, I think, was like 500, 600, 700 megawatt. Now today the total capacity is approaching 500,000 megawatt. Is that probably something will be crossed this year? How did this work? How did the growth work? I remember that at some point I heard that there were 100 wind turbine manufacturers in China. So there were many companies starting 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's quite a story, Stefan. It's a legend, something like a miracle. But I have heard of there's 1,000 OEMs or manufacturers of wind turbines in China, but I have never saw them. I have never saw their names. So today we only have about 15 manufacturers for wind turbines. About the actors in Chinese market, because the market is so huge, and it's also related to the traditional markets, traditional manufacturing. So we have thousands of actors in this market, but only 15 turbine manufacturers. These actors, including investors, including manufacturers, like component manufacturers, and service providers, like installation companies, design and survey institutes, test and certification bodies, and some are doing the operation and maintenance, and some institutions doing the insurance and financing services. So altogether, I mean, all along the industry chains, maybe there are thousands of actors or companies, but for the turbine manufacturers, they are only 15, according to their new record for last year. Yeah.
And they have really now, they have world-leading technology. I remember in 2004, I think it was February, at that time, the German Enercon was the leader in terms of the size. There was a 6 megawatt turbine installed around that time, which I also visited. And when I saw in China, there was a test stand for a 1 megawatt blade, which was developed. And at that time, an achievement for the domestic industry. Now, the largest turbines of the world can be found in China. So in these 20 years, we see in Europe that the size compared to the 6 megawatt has not changed that much. Of course, there are some who can also do now 12, 14 megawatt, but I believe it's now Mingyang, which is now doing the largest wind turbines of the world with 18 megawatt. Is that right?
Yeah, I think some of them are not only Mingyang, but Goldwind and Sunny and Windy. Some of them are doing the biggest ones, and also they are doing the cutting edge technologies for wind turbines. For onshore wind, we have the prototype of turbines for 10 megawatts, 10 megawatts. And we're going to have the prototype of 15 megawatts by this year. Yeah, and by the next half of this year. And also we have the 20 megawatts level turbines for offshore wind turbines. And a small group of 16 turbines have been installed already by Goldwind. Yeah.
Also, yeah, so it's that is really now a new dimension, and most of these turbines, as you just said, they are now used for offshore wind purposes. Now, you explained there are 15 wind turbine manufacturers left, which when you look at the size of the market, it was last year almost 80,000 megawatt. Still for every manufacturer, a reasonable size. How is the investor side? Who is operating those wind farms? Is it also local companies, or how is that?
Yeah, I should say most of the investors or the owners for the wind farms are state-owned companies. That means traditionally they are big power companies, and traditionally they are doing the coal-fired plants. And 10 years ago, they have transformed to the new track to the new area for the renewable energies. So they are doing coal-fired plants as well as they are doing the new energy plants as solar PV and wind powers. So today in China, they as in our survey, they are about 200 investors or developers in Chinese market, including the bigger ones, a dozen of the big ones, and some smaller ones, and local ones. Yeah. So some state-owned, some local province-owned, some are private actors.
Now, that is, of course, a much bigger also number. As you said, 200 developers are there. I assume that's the bigger ones. There must be some also small companies as well. When we look at China is a big country, which has the size of a continent. So which regions, which provinces of China are leading, or where is wind power in particular advanced?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. As you know, the Chinese landscape is quite large. It's pretty big. So, and they will have a different landscape, will have the different climate conditions. So we traditionally divide the Chinese wind power market into three regions. The Northwest, the Northeast, the North China is the first one and also the biggest one. So many wind bases located in these regions. The second is the Central and Eastern China, mainly for distributed wind power, because in these regions there are limits of land uses, a lot of residents, you know. And the third one is the offshore wind power. It started to develop from 2015 and now also get the grid parity for nearshore projects, I mean. So last year we have more than 7 gigawatt offshore wind installations. And in total, we have about 38 gigawatts for offshore. So offshore wind projects are close to the load center because the economy is more prosperous in the coastal premises. So it can support the green development and also can drive the marine economy. And offshore wind is not only energy today, but also a new engine for the local economy. So the local governments are very interested in developing offshore wind. Now we can see many offshore wind clusters in the coastal regions, in some cities. And this will be very helpful to reduce the cost and to push the projects going further and deeper. Will make the deep water projects commercialized by 2030, hopefully.
So it is an important economic factor for the East Coast, and just those who are not so familiar. For example, I think everybody knows Shanghai. That is close to the coast. It's an area where there's a lot of industry, for example, and they can get their power in the future more and more also from offshore wind farms.
So yes, so you can see some R&D centers of companies located in Shanghai and in the Jiangsu and Zhejiang, and also Guangdong is very promising. So, and besides these three markets, as I mentioned, so the international market is also an emerging one, a new one today. We see more and more Chinese companies going abroad to invest and provide products and services. So some of them have set up factories in local countries. Yeah.
Before we come to the export, and I'd like to talk about this a bit also more in detail. You mentioned that the wind industry started in China as a very local for remote areas. I know also we've been working very closely with like Professor Shen Chang, who unfortunately passed away recently. Some of the people who work on small wind, really small wind turbines, which were for remote areas. Is that still today playing a role in some parts of China, which maybe are remote, or are now all the regions connected to the grid and don't need these small wind turbines anymore?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it's not the same story today, because for the remote areas, especially for some isolated islands, for example, most of the places are covered by the grid, by the national grid companies, and even for some isolated places, they could use the off-grid solar PV panel. That's much more cost effective and very convenient for the residents or for the farmers or for the local people to use it. So for this year, so there are little and little volume for the smaller wind turbines in China. Yeah, but there are also several companies are doing the business, and most of them are exporting the products to some other countries, for example, to the north of Europe countries. Yeah.
Yeah, that is something we're also always observing, and we see now that is interesting that in the United States, because of Inflation Reduction Act, there is obviously some increase now in small wind, but obviously the situation that you describe, PV is really now a big competitor for this technology, so it has special niches. Now, you'd already started talking about export and international activities of Chinese manufacturers. I've been knowing, or the numbers that I know is that Chinese manufacturers are not really yet so much, don't have a very big market share worldwide outside China. China has now the installed capacity is almost 50%, but the share of Chinese manufacturers outside China is not really that big. The figures I heard from you was like less than 3%. But there is a change now. So Chinese industry is now also more and more interested in supplying other countries.
Yeah, we can see there's more and more manufacturers could supply their products to other countries, and especially to the emerging markets of wind power. But they're quite little to the traditional wind markets like Europe or America. So we can see there's no exports to the United States within the 3 years. And in total, the export volume is no more than 5% about the total production of the Chinese companies. And that means most of them are installed in Chinese market, because Chinese market is really big. And according to the production capacity, I think the Chinese market couldn't fill the need for most of the companies. But also they are trying to go abroad, not only to sell the products, but also to cooperate with the technologies, to cooperate with the experience. They want to be an international company. They want to coexist in the international or overseas markets with the counterparts. Yeah. So not only for sell products or services, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there is a need, of course, to have more collaboration because, of course, China sees strong growth. There is also, of course, should be stronger Europe and North America. So we have the three big industrial centers of the world at the moment: Europe, North America, and the Chinese. India, of course, also seeing at that, which is a more kind of, I would say, a market which also has a lot of growth coming from within the country. But there's all these markets in Southeast Asia, there in Africa, in Latin America, which need to accelerate wind power a lot. And in one of the previous episodes here, we heard from our colleague from Morocco that the Chinese manufacturer, I believe, Envision, is now about to build a factory in Morocco. Is this now a way that the Chinese industry is going abroad also to kind of build such manufacturing hubs outside China?
Yeah, that's quite a story. We see more and more companies are going abroad to set local factories in the countries in some regions. So we find they are quite well localized, and they have the local laborers, and they have very good cooperation with the local supply chains, and they are doing very good business there. And meanwhile, we also could see some trade barriers from time to time to the new energies, not only for wind power companies, but also to solar PVs and to other. So I think the problem is a little bit complicated sometimes because the Chinese actors have to be aware of the role they play in the process of establishing a stable and reliable global supply chains through fair competition and a very effective cooperation with other partners. So I don't think the trade barriers will help anyone. Nobody will get benefit from it. So only cooperation can drive wind power develop faster and do more good for all. And also for the Chinese companies, for the Chinese counterparts, they need to learn more knowledge, not only from the laws, the rules, but also from the regulations and from the habits about how to do business abroad.
No, I mean, I think what I personally also saw that the Chinese market and the industry grew based on collaboration a lot with also international companies. So I think that is a very good example how also other countries need to do it today. And they can learn a lot from China because now China has a lot of experience, and it's somehow natural that the Chinese industry contributes to, which is the world's biggest challenge, solve the climate crisis and supply the energy technology that is needed nowadays.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. So just now, as I mentioned, China has a very complete supply chains locally. And in the Chinese supply chains, it's very interesting that we have to note there are a lot of international brands and international companies in the Chinese local supply chains here, and they are well localized, and they are doing very good business in China. And they produce the products for the Chinese market, and also they export their products to the overseas markets as well. So we see the Chinese supply chains is including a lot of international companies. It's quite an internationalized one, but not only for Chinese markets. Yeah, I think we should note this. Yeah.
I've personally always been surprised now, not since COVID, there was some break, but before I visited many Chinese factories, and I'm personally German, so I found often I saw some components or just boxes in the factories where it was saying made in Germany. So personally, without being able to quantify that, I've seen that also the Chinese companies are then building with international components. I believe we all agree that we need more such international collaboration, and it's up to the political decision makers to define the fair rules that allow the whole industry to grow, which must include China. I think there is no doubt about that.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. Yeah.
Now, if we before maybe talking about the prospects of the Chinese market, what you as an association what would you say is the biggest or are the biggest challenges for the sector in China? Because there must also be some issues you are now working on. Is it on the technology side? Is it on the policy side? Where do you say we still need to solve some issues?
Yeah, although China is the biggest market, but is far from a perfect stage. So that means we still have a lot of challenges and problems at the same time. Yeah. So generally speaking, the issue is how we can improve the amount of reliable renewable power in the traditional power system and how to establish the new one. And meanwhile, we have to guarantee the energy securities. We have to guarantee the power system securities. So, and for the large wind bases, just now as I mentioned, the three north places, the biggest problem is the transmission and the consumption. Since there's quite a little or smaller smaller power load in these regions, and that the electricity has to be transmitted through long distance high voltage lines to the east. So theoretically, we couldn't make all electricity transmitted to the load centers by transmission lines because of the cost very high, and the land use we couldn't bear that for the land usage. And the best way is to consume the renewable power in the nearby and the local regions. That means some energy consuming industries and companies have to move to the west and to the north. And it's not an easy thing, and it couldn't be done within a very short period of time. And for the distributed wind power, we need to develop very effective business models. For example, the community wind power, so let the local residents and farmers to become the stakeholders. It's quite common for European countries. I know in Germany, it's quite common for community wind power, but not the same picture in China, because we are quite customized. Since the very beginning, most of Chinese wind power projects are large projects, are centralized projects. So we're not quite familiar with the distributed ones, but now we're doing that, and we're going to trying to combine the benefits with the rural revitalization policies today. And for the offshore wind, we know it's a trend. We know it's a very technology concentrated, and we need to go deeper and go further. But there is no relative rules and regulations so far, for the wind projects in the exclusive economic zones today. So there are several pilot projects today, but we still have a lot of things to do, I think. So we have different challenges and problems in different markets and different regions in China. Yeah.
I think what you describe is quite common in all the countries which have a share of, like you said, 10% wind power share now in China. Germany recently had more than 30% even, but all the countries which are at that range of coming above 10%, they are now discussing how to integrate, how to balance and match demand and supply. Of course, on the local level, a lot can be done. You can also as you just said, this discussion is happening also in Europe, for example, that maybe some manufacturing moves to where there is more wind or more space. I think that's more the issue. Huh? It's not so much that the wind is blowing, but you need space for the windmills. So this is very similar, and I believe it also underlines the need to exchange international experiences. Which role does artificial intelligence play in all this? Because this is something where I believe that most countries are just starting to think about that. They call it a smart grid. I heard from Chinese companies they're already working on that. Is that something that's kind of in China already mainstream, or is it also just in the initial stage to use artificial intelligence, for example, to meet or to match supply and demand?
Yeah, in our systems, we call it a new or reformed power systems, and that's including the smart grid concept, of course. But according to different institutions, according to different sectors, even for the smart grid, they have different concepts or different understandings, I think. But actually, in common, I think in China we have the same idea about the trend, about the directions. I think we have to balance the supply side to the demand with the demand side, and we have to build new systems. The new systems have to based on the smart grid, and but smartness or intelligence, no, not the only thing. It couldn't solve anything, I think, but it's technology. But actually, we need more reform and new systems of policies, I think. And so, from this perspective, we should learn more. We still have much more to learn from the European counterparts to European experiences and other experience. Even though we have the biggest market today, we still have much more to learn. Yeah.
But that's obviously something that really the world has to see this as a joint challenge, and to overcome and find together the solutions. Now, coming to the end of our very interesting podcast, what are the prospects of the Chinese wind power market? In the short term, you already indicated to me, we had a personal conversation, that there might be even stronger growth in the short term this year. But what is happening in the maybe this next year, and what's happening when you look at like the next 20, 25 years? What will be the role of wind power?
Yeah, thank you, Stefan. We're coming to the exciting state, right? Questions. So, as you know, China announced the target of carbon neutrality by 2060. But I believe, personally, I believe the power sector and the energy sector will get there ahead of the schedule. So we believe the power should get there, should get a neutrality ahead of other sectors or industries. That means by 2050, we will have about 3,000 gigawatts wind power and 3,000 gigawatts solar power in China. That means 3 terawatts. So variable renewables will be the principal part of the energy consumptions in China by that time. And this is really an exciting picture. But the only way to there is a transformed energy and power system, just now as I mentioned. I think how to build a transformed and a new energy system, a new power system in China, based on the market mechanisms, is very cost effective, is very smart, it's very fluctuate, and contains most of them are the renewables. So that's still a challenge for us, but it's very promising.
Yeah, we know we have challenges ahead, but you mentioned, was it 3,000 gigawatt as you see as possible in the year 2050?
Yeah, I think it's possible. Yeah.
That is 6 times more or less the current capacity, which, yeah, I mean, 6 times is not, doesn't sound totally unrealistic, but we see there's a lot ahead of us for China, but also for the whole world. At the moment, China is certainly one of the locomotives of the switch to renewable energy worldwide. I personally would like to say thank you to you, also your colleagues at the Chinese Wind Energy Association, for the great work that you've been doing, that we come to that point, which is not only important for China, but for the whole world. And of course, wish you good luck and all the very best for the years to come, because as we just heard, there's still a lot that needs to be done. In this sense, thank you very much, I think that was a very interesting conversation we had.
Thank you, Stephen. And also thank you very much for having me today. And also thank you for the support and assistance from WWEA for so many years. And through WWEA's platform, we could get knowledge and information from all over the world, from other countries, from other experts. I think we'll do more efforts. We'll do everything to build a better WWEA platforms to develop faster for wind powers and everywhere in the world. Thank you very much, Stephen.
Thank you so much. And I believe, coming back to the global picture, this is today more important than ever before. We are in a geopolitical, not so easy situation, but if we can work together on this level on which we are working, then there is also hope that the whole world maybe will calm down and come to more prosperity and more peace. With
Definitely.
this, thank you. And
I
with
believe
this,
that. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen.
we'll say
Bye-bye.
goodbye to our audience. And well, we look forward to the next episode in 2 weeks. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.